February 18, 1945, Eastern Germany. A Canadian Sherman tank erupts in flames for the third time beneath the same commander. The statistical probability of his survival is beyond calculation. Most Sherman crews do not survive their first hit. He has walked away from 3 burning hulls. Inside one of those shattered metal coffins, he helped destroy the most feared tank ace in German history without ever knowing the man's name. This is not a story Hollywood tells. This is the story of Major Sydney Radley-Walters, the highest-scoring tank commander in Western Allied history, and the impossible mathematics of staying alive when death is the only reasonable outcome. The Sherman tank earned its nickname honestly. German crews called it the Tommy Cooker. American soldiers called it the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter that always lit on the first strike. The statistics were unforgiving. In Normandy, the average life expectancy of a Sherman tank in combat against German armor was measured in hours, not days. Crew survival rates hovered near 17% once penetration occurred. The Sherman's ammunition storage design meant that a single armor-piercing round through the hull could ignite every shell inside within seconds. Men burned alive in steel ovens while enemy crews watched through gunner optics. The Sherman was not built to duel Tigers or Panthers. It was built to be manufactured in staggering numbers, shipped across oceans, and thrown into battle with the understanding that most would burn. Sydney Radley-Walters commanded Shermans for 3 years. He walked away from 3 total losses. He accumulated 18 confirmed armor kills, possibly more. He survived when survival was a mathematical absurdity. He was not supposed to be a tank commander at all. Sydney Radley-Walters began the war as an infantry officer with the Canadian Army, patrolling the coast of Newfoundland in 1940, watching for U-boats that never came. He had never been inside a tank. He had never fired a tank gun. He had never studied armor tactics beyond what any infantry officer needed to know about requesting support. In late 1942, the Canadian Army needed tank officers desperately. The armored divisions were expanding faster than trained crews could fill them. Radley-Walters received orders. He was being transferred to the 1st Hussars, a cavalry regiment converting to tanks. He had 6 weeks to learn everything. The training was insufficient. It was always insufficient. 6 weeks to understand gunnery, mechanics, radio procedure, map reading from a moving vehicle, coordinated maneuver, target identification at speed, and the brutal reality that tanks do not fight alone or they die alone. Radley-Walters absorbed what he could. He drilled his crew relentlessly. He discovered something during those frantic weeks that would define his entire combat career. Fatigue killed more crews than enemy fire. Exhausted gunners missed shots. Tired drivers threw tracks. Sleepless commanders made errors in judgment that turned simple movements into death traps. Rest was not a luxury. Rest was ammunition. He built his command philosophy around that single principle. His crews would rotate sleep schedules even in combat zones. His tanks would pull back from the line when fatigue degraded performance, even if other commanders called it cowardice. He did not care what other commanders thought. Dead heroes were still dead. June 6, 1944. Normandy. The invasion Radley-Walters spent 2 years training for finally came. His regiment landed on Juno Beach in the second wave, tanks rolling off landing craft into chest-deep water, drivers praying the waterproofing held, commanders scanning for German strongpoints through periscopes barely above the surf line. The beach was chaos. Burning vehicles, wounded men dragging themselves toward cover, explosions throwing sand and shrapnel in curtains across the dunes. Radley-Walters got his tank inland. He linked up with his squadron. He began moving through the hedgerows that would define Normandy combat for the next 2 months. The hedgerows were a nightmare. Ancient earthen berms topped with thick vegetation, creating natural walls between every field in the French countryside. Each hedgerow was a potential ambush site. Each gap between fields was a killing zone. German anti-tank crews used the terrain perfectly. They waited until Allied tanks committed to crossing an open field, then fired from concealed positions in the next hedgerow. By the time the Allied crews identified the firing position, the German gun crew had displaced. Radley-Walters learned quickly: never cross open ground without reconnaissance. Never silhouette your tank on a ridgeline. Never bunch up with other tanks. Never follow the same route twice. The lessons were written in burning Shermans. July 8, 1944, south of Caen. Radley-Walters commanded a Sherman named Caribou. His squadron was pushing through another network of hedgerows, trying to flank a German defensive line that had held for 3 days. Intelligence reported minimal armor in the sector. Intelligence was wrong. Radley-Walters was moving through a sunken lane, Caribou in the lead position, when the German gunner fired. The anti-tank round struck Caribou's frontal armor at an oblique angle. The shell penetrated. It did not detonate immediately. The crew had perhaps 2 seconds. Radley-Walters screamed the order, "Bail out." All hatches opened simultaneously. 5 men threw themselves from the tank in different directions. Caribou exploded 6 seconds later. The entire turret lifted off the hull and landed 15 feet away. Radley-Walters lay in a ditch, ears ringing, watching his first command burn. The German gun crew did not fire again. They had already displaced. Radley-Walters and his crew walked back to friendly lines. They were assigned a new tank the next day. He named it Caribou as well. The pattern was consistent now. Radley-Walters understood what the training manuals could not teach. The Sherman would never win a direct gunnery duel with German heavy armor. The Tiger and Panther had better guns, better armor, and better optics. A Sherman crew that tried to fight like a Tiger crew would die like a Sherman crew. Speed was the only advantage. The Sherman was faster than German heavy tanks. It accelerated faster. It turned faster. It could move through terrain that would bog down a 60-ton Tiger. Radley-Walters built his tactics around movement. Never stop. Never give the enemy a stationary target. Use terrain to break line of sight. Force the German crew to traverse their turret to adjust their aim to make hurried shots. A hurried shot from a German gunner was survivable. A carefully aimed shot was not. His crews practiced maneuver until it became instinct. They learned to read terrain at speed, to identify hull-down positions, to use buildings and tree lines as moving cover. Radley-Walters taught his gunners to fire on the move, accepting lower accuracy in exchange for staying alive long enough to take a second shot. August 1944. The British and Canadian forces received a new weapon, the Sherman Firefly. British engineers had mounted the 17-pounder anti-tank gun inside a standard Sherman hull. The result was a tank that could kill Tigers and Panthers at range. The Firefly had limitations. The 17-pounder was a massive gun for the Sherman chassis. It created severe recoil. It reduced ammunition storage. The muzzle blast was enormous, giving away the Firefly's position with every shot. But it could penetrate German heavy armor at distances the standard 75mm gun could not touch. Radley-Walters received Fireflies into his squadron with specific orders. Hide them. Do not let German crews identify the Fireflies until the shooting started. Paint over the distinctive muzzle brake. Position Fireflies behind standard Shermans. Let the Germans see the regular Shermans first. Let them assume they were facing standard guns. Then kill them with the 17-pounder before they understood the threat. Radley-Walters refined the tactic further. He positioned his Fireflies in overwatch positions, hull down behind terrain, covering the movement of standard Shermans in the open. German crews would engage the visible Shermans, concentrating on the immediate threat, unaware that a Firefly gunner was tracking them from a concealed position. The Firefly would fire once. That single shot had to kill. If it missed, if it only damaged the target, the German crew would identify the Firefly and return fire with every weapon available. Radley-Walters drilled his Firefly gunners endlessly. First shot, every time. There would not be a second chance. August 8, 1944. Operation Totalize. The Canadian First Army launched a massive offensive south of Caen, attempting to break through the German defensive lines and push toward Falaise. The operation began at night with a rolling artillery barrage, and armored columns advancing under searchlight illumination bounced off low clouds. Radley-Walters led his squadron through the initial breakthrough. By midday, they had penetrated several kilometers into German-held territory. The resistance was lighter than expected. German units were pulling back, ceding ground, forming a new defensive line further south. Radley-Walters received orders to advance to Chateau Gaumesnil, a small estate outside the village of Syntho, and establish a defensive position. His squadron reached the chateau in early afternoon. The position was strong, high ground, clear fields of fire to the north and east, stone buildings providing cover for dismounted crews. Radley-Walters positioned his tanks in a crescent formation around the chateau, creating overlapping fields of fire. He placed 2 Fireflies in hull-down positions with clear sightlines to the most likely German approach routes. Then he waited. The German counterattack came from the northeast. Reports started filtering in from forward observers around 1400 hours. Armor moving south, heavy armor, multiple contacts. Radley-Walters ordered his crews to combat positions. Engines stayed running, guns loaded, gunners tracking their assigned sectors. The tension in a tank before contact is a specific kind of horror. The crew is sealed inside a steel box, vision limited to narrow periscopes and gun sights, hearing reduced to engine noise and radio static, waiting for the impact that might be the last thing they ever experience. There is no cover. There is no foxhole to dive into. There is only the thin armor plate between the crew and high-velocity anti-tank rounds designed to penetrate that exact armor. Radley-Walters kept his crews focused on their tasks. Gunner, watch your sector. Loader, keep the ready rack full. Driver, be prepared to move on command. Radio operator, maintain contact with squadron. The discipline kept the fear manageable. The German tanks appeared at maximum engagement range. Tigers, at least 5 of them, possibly more behind the lead elements. They were advancing in a loose formation, using terrain masking, coordinated movement suggesting experienced crews. Radley-Walters made the critical decision. Do not engage yet. Let them close the range. The Fireflies could kill at this distance, but the margin for error was too small. Wait. Draw them into the trap. The Tigers continued advancing. They had not identified the Canadian position yet, or they were confident enough in their armor to accept the risk. Radley-Walters watched through his commander's periscope. 1,500 meters, 1,400, 1,300. The lead Tiger was moving slightly ahead of the formation, aggressive, expecting minimal resistance. 1,200 meters. Radley-Walters issued the fire command. Both Fireflies fired simultaneously. The lead Tiger took a 17-pounder round through the frontal turret armor. The shell penetrated, detonated inside the fighting compartment, killed the crew instantly, and ignited the ammunition. The Tiger exploded from the inside, turret hatches blowing open, flame and smoke erupting from every opening. The second Firefly targeted the Tiger immediately behind the leader. The shot struck low, hitting the hull. Penetration. The Tiger slewed sideways through a track, stopped moving. Crew belayed out. The remaining Tigers reacted instantly, exactly as trained German crews would react. They dispersed, sought cover, began returning fire, attempted to identify the firing positions. Radley-Walters had already displaced his Fireflies. The standard Shermans engaged from different positions, firing on the move, forcing the German crews to divide their attention. The battle became chaos. Armor-piercing rounds crossing the fields in both directions, explosions, smoke, burning vehicles obscuring sightlines, radio traffic overlapping, commanders trying to coordinate, gunners calling out targets, loaders screaming for more ammunition. One of the Tigers identified a Canadian position and fired. The 75mm round from the Tiger's main gun crossed 1,200 meters in under 2 seconds. It struck a Sherman on the turret side, penetrated the thin armor, killed the loader and gunner instantly, wounded the commander. The Sherman did not explode. The crew bilayed out, dragging their wounded commander. Another Tiger engaged, fired at a moving Sherman, missed, fired again, hit the engine deck, started a fire. The Sherman crew escaped. Radley-Walters repositioned Caribou, bringing his own gun to bear on the Tiger that had just scored 2 hits. His gunner fired, miss. The Tiger was moving, crossing behind a low ridge, only the turret visible. Radley-Walters ordered his driver forward, closing the angle. His gunner fired again, hit. The round struck the Tiger's turret ring, the weak point where the rotating turret met the hull. Penetration. The Tiger stopped. No secondary explosion. The crew might still be alive inside, stunned, attempting to assess damage. Radley-Walters did not give them time. He ordered his loader to prepare high-explosive rounds. The gunner fired 3 HE shells into the immobilized Tiger. The concussive force killed or incapacitated anyone still inside. The German attack was collapsing. 3 Tigers destroyed, 1 immobilized. The remaining German armor was withdrawing, unwilling to continue the engagement against prepared positions with clear fields of fire. Radley-Walters ordered his squadron to hold position. Do not pursue. Pursuing armor into unknown terrain was how crews died. Consolidate, account for casualties, assess damage, resupply ammunition, treat wounded. His squadron had lost 2 Shermans destroyed, 1 damaged but recoverable. 4 men killed, 7 wounded. The Germans left 5 Tigers burning or immobilized in the fields north of Chateau Gaumesnil. The Canadian crews began the grim work of counting confirmed kills, marking positions, preparing intelligence reports. Sydney Radley-Walters did not learn until after the war that one of the Tigers destroyed that day at Chateau Gaumesnil was numbered 007. He did not learn until historians began analyzing German records that Tiger 007 belonged to SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, the most famous tank commander in the German military, credited with over 130 armor kills on the Eastern Front and in Normandy. Wittmann was a propaganda icon, featured in German newsreels, awarded the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, personally decorated by Adolf Hitler. His destruction should have been international news. It was not. The fog of war was absolute. Multiple Canadian and British units engaged German armor near Sintho on August 8th. Multiple Tigers were destroyed. The exact circumstances of Wittmann's death remained unclear for decades. Historians argued. Veterans submitted conflicting accounts. Tank commanders claimed credit. Artillery units claimed credit. Anti-tank gun crews claimed credit. Radley-Walters never claimed anything. He filed his after-action report. He noted the destruction of multiple Tiger tanks. He moved to the next objective. The fighting did not stop. August became September. September became October. The Allied armies pushed east across France into Belgium toward the German border. Radley-Walters fought in every major engagement. His confirmed kill count increased. 6th tank, 8th, 10th, 12th. Each kill represented a moment of absolute precision, a gunner making an impossible shot, a crew executing maneuvers under fire, terrain exploited perfectly, enemy mistakes punished instantly. 15th tank. 16th. The numbers were exceptional for Western Allied armor. Eastern Front commanders accumulated higher tallies, both German and Soviet, Because the Eastern Front was a war of annihilation fought across endless steppes with massive armor formations clashing for years. The Western Front after Normandy was different. German armor was withdrawing, preserving strength, avoiding decisive engagements. Opportunities for tank versus tank combat decreased. Radley-Walters continued to find those opportunities. Was wounded twice. Shrapnel from artillery near Falaise in late August, concussion from a near-miss anti-tank round in September during the fighting near the Scheldt estuary. He refused evacuation both times. Leaving his crew was unacceptable. Leaving his squadron without experienced leadership was unacceptable. The wounds were painful but not incapacitating. He had the battalion surgeon patch him up in the field and return to his tank. The concussion was more serious. Headaches, blurred vision, difficulty concentrating, symptoms that should have meant immediate medical evacuation and weeks of recovery. Radley-Walters ignored the symptoms. He commanded his squadron through the liberation of Belgium. He led reconnaissance patrols into the Netherlands. He trained replacement crews, passing on every lesson learned, every tactic developed, every mistake that killed other men so these new crews might survive their first contact. 18th confirmed kill, October 1944. A German Panther tank destroyed during a meeting engagement near the Dutch-Belgian border. Radley-Walters maneuvered Caribou into a flanking position while the Panther engaged other Canadian tanks. His gunner fired a single shot into the Panther's side armor. Penetration. Catastrophic ammunition detonation. The Panther's turret blew completely off the hull, tumbling through the air, landing inverted 30 meters away. 18th kill. Radley-Walters did not celebrate. Celebration meant the crew was forgetting that the next engagement might kill them all. Winter 1944. The German military was collapsing, but slowly, selling every kilometer of ground with blood. The Ardennes offensive in December showed that Germany still possessed the capacity for major counterattacks. Allied commanders could not assume the war would end quickly. Radley-Walters and his regiment pushed into Germany itself in early 1945. The fighting was bitter. German units defending their homeland fought with desperation that exceeded anything seen in France or Belgium. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. Cities burned. Refugees clogged the roads. The moral simplicity of liberating occupied nation disappeared when the battles were fought in German towns against German soldiers protecting German homes. February 18, 1945. Eastern Germany. The details are fragmentary. Radley-Walters never spoke extensively about this day. His official records note only that his tank was destroyed by enemy fire. The crew evacuated successfully. No casualties. It was his third total loss. Third time walking away from a burning Sherman. Third statistical impossibility. The Sherman tank's design meant that catastrophic fires were almost inevitable once armor was penetrated. Surviving one such fire required luck. Surviving two defied probability. Surviving three was beyond rational explanation. Radley-Walters attributed it to crew drill. His crews practiced emergency evacuation until every man could exit the tank in darkness, in smoke, under fire, without conscious thought. Muscle memory saved lives when conscious thought was impossible. May 7, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended. Sydney Radley-Walters had survived 3 years of armored combat. He had commanded tanks through Normandy, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. He had accumulated 18 confirmed armor kills, possibly more that were never officially verified. He had been wounded, concussed, and burned out of 3 tanks. He was 26 years old. The transition to peace was jarring. Soldiers who had lived with imminent death for years suddenly faced a future measured in decades, not days. Radley-Walters remained in the Canadian Army. He was a professional now. The skills were transferable: leadership, tactical planning, logistics, training. He rose through the ranks steadily. He commanded armored units during peacetime. He served in staff positions. He attended military colleges. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel, then colonel, eventually brigadier general. His military career spanned nearly 4 decades. He retired in 1979. The honors came slowly. Radley-Walters was not a self-promoter. He did not write memoirs. He did not seek media attention. He did not claim credit for killing Michael Wittmann, even after historians identified him as the most likely candidate based on position reports, fields of fire, and German unit records. Other veterans were more vocal. Other tank commanders gave interviews, appeared in documentaries, wrote books about their experiences. Radley-Walters remained quiet. When asked about his combat record, he deflected. He spoke about his crews. He spoke about the men who died. He spoke about luck, terrain, and the importance of rest. He did not speak about personal glory. The controversy over Michael Wittmann's death persisted for decades. Multiple units engaged German armor near Chateau on August 8, 1944. Multiple commanders claimed involvement. British units insisted their tanks destroyed Wittmann. Canadian units submitted conflicting reports. Artillery officers claimed their fire missions knocked out Tiger 007. Anti-tank gun crews produced evidence of firing positions that could have engaged the target. The evidence was examined, debated, analyzed. Historians cross-referenced German records with Allied after-action reports. They mapped unit positions. They interviewed surviving crew members. The consensus gradually emerged. Sydney Radley-Walters, commanding a squadron of the 1st Hussars at Chateau Gaumesnil, positioned Fireflies in overwatch, directed coordinated fire, and destroyed multiple Tigers, including the one carrying Germany's most famous tank Ace. Radley-Walters never claimed this. He never denied it either. When pressed, he acknowledged his squadron engaged Tigers that day. He acknowledged multiple confirmed kills. He acknowledged the historical evidence suggested his unit was responsible. Then he changed the subject. His philosophy was consistent from Normandy to retirement. Tank combat was not about individual heroism. It was about crew coordination, tactical discipline, and staying alive long enough to complete the mission. Heroes died. Professionals survived. The Sherman was an inferior tank by every technical measure compared to German heavy armor, but American industry produced 50,000 of them. Quantity was its own quality. Crews that understood the Sherman's limitations and fought accordingly could win. Crews that tried to be heroes burned. Radley-Walters kept his crews alive by refusing to let them be heroes. He kept himself alive the same way: rest before exhaustion, maneuver before direct fire, terrain before armor, survival before glory. Why did his story nearly vanish from popular memory? The answer is uncomfortable. Popular culture prefers myths to reality. The Hollywood version of tank combat features lone warriors in superior machines, winning through individual courage and dramatic last stands. George Patton, Michael Wittmann, Audie Murphy. Men whose stories fit the narrative of singular heroism. Radley-Walters does not fit that mold. He was not flamboyant. He was not quotable. He did not cultivate a public image. His tactics were based on minimizing risk, not maximizing drama. He won by being careful, methodical, and disciplined. Those qualities do not translate well to cinema, but those qualities kept men alive. Those qualities won battles. Those qualities ended the war. Real battlefield leadership is not cinematic. It is a captain who enforces rest schedules even when his superiors want continuous operations. It is a squadron commander who pulls damaged tanks back from the line when glory-seeking officers want to push forward. It is a major who teaches replacement crews that survival matters more than kill counts, that going home alive is more important than dying dramatically. Sydney Radley-Walters commanded tanks for 3 years and brought most of his men home. That is the measure of leadership that matters, not the number of enemy tanks destroyed, not the fame of the enemy commanders killed. The number of men who survived to see their families again because their commander valued their lives more than his reputation. He died in 2015 at the age of 95. The obituaries noted his military service, his 18 confirmed kills, his probable role in the destruction of Michael Wittmann. The details were accurate but sterile, unable to capture what it meant to survive 3 years in a Sherman tank, unable to explain the mathematics of staying alive when every probability calculation said death was inevitable. His funeral was private. His family released brief statements. Veterans organizations issued respectful tributes. Then the news cycle moved on. His name faded again into the specialized journals and regimental histories where it had lived for 70 years. But the story remains. Somewhere in the field south of Caen, metal fragments from Tiger 007 still lie in the earth, rusting slowly, visited occasionally by battlefield archaeologists and military historians. The exact spot where Michael Wittmann died is marked now, a quiet memorial in French farmland. Tourists visit. They take photographs. They imagine the battle. Most do not know the name Sydney Radley-Walters. Most do not know that the man who destroyed Germany's greatest tank ace never sought credit, never claimed glory, and spent the rest of his life deflecting attention from his own achievements. That obscurity was intentional. Radley-Walters understood something fundamental about war that popular culture refuses to accept. War is not about heroes. War is about doing the job, protecting your people, and coming home. Everything else is mythology. The Sherman tank was a death trap by design, a calculated sacrifice of crew survivability for industrial efficiency. 50,000 rolling coffins shipped overseas to face superior German armor with the understanding that most would burn. Sydney Radley-Walters climbed into those coffins repeatedly for 3 years. He walked away from 3 total losses. He brought most of his crews home alive. He accumulated 18 confirmed kills against armor that should have killed him in the first engagement. He helped destroy the most famous tank commander in German history without ever knowing or caring who the man was. Then he filed his report and moved to the next objective. That is not the story Hollywood tells, but it is the story that mattered. It is the story of duty over glory, responsibility over reputation, and survival over heroism. It is the story of a man who understood that the best commanders are the ones whose names you never hear, because they were too busy keeping their people alive to cultivate legends. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing to this channel for more untold histories from the Second World War. Leave a like if you believe these stories deserve to be remembered. And here is a question worth considering. What defines true heroism in war? Is it the dramatic last stand, the impossible victory, the legend that echoes through history? Or is it the quiet officer who brings his people home alive, who values their survival over his own glory, whose name fades from memory because he never sought the spotlight? Share your thoughts in the comments. These conversations matter. These stories matter. The men who lived them deserve more than obscurity.